On Tech News Today, Android Auto hits the road, the NSA shuts down mass surveillance of phone metadata, and we'll give you a preview of some of the things coming up at Google I/O this week. It's all coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Tech News Today for Tuesday, May 26th, 2015. This episode is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. Are you hiring? With ZipRecruiter.com, you can post to 100-plus job sites, including social networks, all with a single click. Screen, rate, and hire the right candidates fast. Try ZipRecruiter with a free 4-day trial now at ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. Welcome to the show. My name is Mike Elgan. Our co-anchor today is After Nine's content czar, Joe Panettieri. How you doing, Joe?
Mike, I've been great. How was your 3-day weekend?
It was awesome. It lasted 3 days, which was the best part, I think. We had a lot of fun. We drove to Washington State to visit my brother, and I got to go to Oregon for the first time. We didn't get to spend any time there, but we drove through, and it was quite a drive. We had a great time. I've seen more trees in the last 3 or 4 days than I have ever seen in my entire life, and big ones too. So it's a lot of fun. Well, we got a lot of news. We got a lot of news coming up. We got Google I/O coming up and a little bit of a preview for you on this show. So why don't we jump right into this? The long-awaited Android Auto operating system is finally available in brand new cars. The first car to get it is a 2015 Hyundai Sonata. Pete Pachal is the tech editor for Mashable, and he has played with it and joins us now to talk about it. How you doing, Pete?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Now, when is the first Android Auto car actually going to be deliverable to actual drivers?
Well, it's out now. The 2015 Hyundai Sonata, I believe, available now because not only is it going forward going to have Android Auto as something you can buy within the car, existing owners can get it as a software update. So basically, even though it's not the most easy software update, it's not like it's over the air. You have to bring it into a dealership and they'll update it for you. Although Hyundai does say that sometime this summer they will give you the option to basically download it, put it on a USB stick, and stick that in your dash, and that'll give you Android Auto. So it's a bit of a roundabout kind of way to upgrade, as it always is with cars. But at least going forward, you can buy one with it pre-installed.
Hey, Pete, have you had a chance to try this or speak with anyone who's actually used it so far?
Yeah, I got a chance to test drive it. So I was test driving since Friday, Android Auto. I had some issues actually getting it going, which was kind of gave me a bit of a delay in getting going on the review. So it's not the most helpful interface in getting you going. I used 2 Lollipop. First, you need Lollipop. You need a Lollipop phone, which is only like 10% of Android phones right now. So you need a much newer phone. So I used 2 different phones. I used a Samsung Galaxy Note Edge with the Lollipop upgrade, which is fairly new. I think it came out 2 weeks ago, and a Nexus 6. And strangely enough, the Nexus 6, even though it's Google branded, didn't work at all. And there was no prompt that just said it's not compatible. And I have no idea why. I eventually got the Note Edge to work with it. And I think it's because you need everything state-of-the-art. You need the latest software update on your phone. You need, obviously, it installed on your car. And you also need, I think, all your apps updated. This is my suspicion on why it didn't work. I think I had an app or 2 that wasn't fully updated. But otherwise, there was no help at all. It just said it didn't work. So I finally got it working on the Edge. But once I did, it was really great. I mean, basically, it gives you this nice and smooth, very simplified Google interface with Google Maps, some media apps, including Spotify and Google Play Music, and the ability to take and make calls, all sort of packaged into one interface. And it's very neat.
Now, you've been covering the space for a long time. Were there any surprises in your hands-on review of this that you didn't expect from what you knew from previous announcements?
Well, there was one surprise that was really more of a quirk, was actually Pandora does not support Android Auto. I found that surprising. There's Spotify. There's a number of other media apps in addition to Google Play Music. I used NPR One for a little while, for example. But even though Pandora has widespread support in cars and a lot of different devices, it doesn't support it by Android Auto. Now, this is kind of a problem because even though you can always switch to your car radio, even when you're using Android Auto, you can't switch to Pandora because that's also a connected app. You know, you can't have its connected app and Android Auto working at the same time through your phone. So if you're using Android Auto, you can't really listen to Pandora. That was weird. The only other thing that surprised me, and this was a bit of a criticism, was that it's not as responsive as I expected. Because as soon as you say something's Android and you're putting it on a screen, I think we have an expectation that it's going to work as well as your phone, that it's going to be that fluid-like, that buttery smoothness that they like to talk about in terms of animations and just general tapping and clicking. There isn't going to be much of a delay. On a car dashboard, there is more of a like, oh, I'm pinching to zoom and the screen needs a half second to catch up. Or when you tap, you're waiting a couple seconds for it to actually respond to the tap. You sometimes see this on phones, but not often. Especially with ones with good processors. But that happens a lot on Android Auto. Expect it to be kind of a slower experience than you're experiencing on your phone.
Hey, Pete, could you talk a little bit about whether or not Google has figured out, for instance, say I'm an Android phone user right now and I'm storing music and movies up in Google's cloud, for instance. Does this auto approach synchronize all that? Like, can I get all the music that I already have up in Google's cloud out to my car now? And then do you see Google exposing more and more of its own apps and cloud services out to this auto approach?
For the Cloud Locker, I believe so. I don't usually use Google Music, but there is a Google Music option, and I'm honestly not sure if that's just the subscription stuff or in addition to your cloud storage. I think Google Play Music mixes that all together, so I'm pretty sure that's available. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Do you think Google will start to introduce more and more apps from its cloud and expose it out to the auto approach?
Yeah, I think the whole idea is to get more third-party guys, more third-party apps, and even more Google apps that make sense onto the dashboard. Now, the big question I have, and I believe the answer is no, but is that will there ever be any other mapping service other than Google Maps? Now, everybody uses Google Maps. It's kind of the de facto best option out there. But there are other options. There's obviously Nokia Here is probably the most prominent one that is on Android. So what will they ever support those other maps? And it's a good question because I personally experience, because there's another question for CarPlay, Apple's CarPlay, which is the competing system from Apple. Because I use Google Maps all the time on my iPhone, I would love to be able to do that on either CarPlay or Android Auto or something, but for now, that's simply not an option for me. If I have a CarPlay system, I'm going to have to use Apple Maps. If I have an Android Auto system, I've got to use Google Maps, and never the twain shall meet. I'm kind of curious if that's ever going to change.
Yeah. So Pete, do you think you provided some hints there that developers may be able to get involved in this? So is there an actual ISV developer kit and any type of buzz about it yet, or is it far too early to say?
The developer kit, that's a good question. I actually don't know the answer to that one. There may be, but if there isn't, I strongly suspect by the end of this week there will be one because, as you mentioned at the top of the show, Google I/O is coming up fast, and Android Auto will certainly be a part of that conversation, even though its launch was technically last year.
Pete, I caught a few minutes this morning of your I think it was Meerkat with Christina Warren going on and on about, I think you were unboxing some kind of new Apple, shiny Apple iProduct. And it's hilarious because both of you have a lot to say all the time. There are no awkward silences when the two of you are on camera. So that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. How often do you do those sorts of things?
We do Tech Tuesday every week. We try to mix it up. Lance Ulanoff, our colleague, sometimes joins us. The most difficult thing about doing that broadcast is just getting everyone in the same room. But yeah, it's fun. I got to say, I got to give huge credit to Christina on that broadcast. I mean, there's never awkward silence when Christina's in the room. She always has an infinite number of thoughts on every topic, and probably has forgotten more about the topic than you ever knew. Yeah, she's dynamic. It's great, and we do them every Tuesday at 11 Eastern. So tune in on Periscope and Meerkat.
Cool. That's 8 a.m. Pacific. Pete Pachal is at Mashable.com and on Twitter at Pete Pachal. Thank you so much for joining us today, Pete.
My pleasure.
All right. More news in a sec, but first let's talk about hiring the perfect person with our sponsor today, ZipRecruiter. You know, what is ZipRecruiter actually? It's actually a matchmaking service. It's not just about you hiring the right person. It's about the right person finding you. And so that's really what you want when you hire a new candidate. Of course, you know, hiring people is a relatively rare and infinitely important act for you and your business or your department or whatever it is you're hiring for. And you want to make sure not only that you really, really like the person, but that the person really, really likes you and your company. And so, you know, this is what ZipRecruiter exists to do. You can post so easily. You can post 100+ job sites with a single click, and also social networks like Facebook, Google+, and Twitter. In fact, you can even set it up so that your new job postings automatically go out over Twitter the second you post them. And that's a very powerful thing, especially if you're hiring lots of people, or you're in a period of growth where you have to hire pretty constantly. You can just post once, and within 24 hours, your candidates roll in to not just to email or something like that, but into ZipRecruiter's super easy to use interface. They manage all that stuff for you and make it really, really easy. You can even create custom email responses when candidates apply, and you can find candidates in any industry nationwide. You can quickly screen applicants, rate them, and hire the perfect person really fast. That's why ZipRecruiter has been used by more than 400,000 businesses, and you can try it now for free. And it's so, so easy. Try ZipRecruiter today with a free 40-day trial and get your perfect candidate before they go to somebody else by going to ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. Remember, ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. Well, the U.S. Senate shot down the USA Freedom Act Saturday. The bill would have moved the location of phone metadata to the phone companies and required the NSA to get court order for access instead of just having free reign to all the data. The companion bill passed by a landslide in the House, so the Congress is deadlocked, which means that the issue is decided by a recent court ruling this month, ruling the program illegal. So just a few hours after the Senate reached its vote, the NSA started shutting down the program, or so they said. Joe Panettieri, I think that, you know, Edward Snowden kind of, you know, spoiled this for the NSA anyway. I think you'd have to be a really, really dumb terrorist to not have heard about NSA metadata phone collection, and it's probably useless at this point for that reason.
Yeah, a lot of data collection, but what's the value there? I agree with you, Mike. It's also interesting that all this came down on a Saturday when most of the press and media is off for a holiday weekend. So, you know, I always have my conspiracy theories about Washington, and that just started another one.
Yeah, Christmas Eve was too far away from them to actually do this, so they had to act quickly on a 3-day Memorial Day weekend. What are you going to do? It's Washington. Well, the Department of Justice, speak of the devil, posted policy guidelines about using quadcopter drones. These include a ban on federal agencies using drones to monitor citizens while they're exercising First Amendment rights, such as protesting. And also, they're requiring that federal agencies need warrants to use drones when they snoop on people who have a, quote, reasonable expectation of privacy, unquote. So, for example, when you're growing weed in your backyard, a federal agency can't just fly a drone over your backyard because you can expect a certain amount of privacy in your backyard. However, the local police are not bound by this. This is the Department of Justice, so that's an entirely different issue. But this is, I think, good news, Joe Panettieri, and I think these are reasonable protections for the DOJ to implement.
I think so, but let me play devil's advocate. You know, I'm all for privacy, but on the other hand, I would actually like to have law enforcement have a way to use drones to monitor protests just for safety reasons, not for anything else. So you know, I'm a little torn on this one, actually, ironically enough, because yes, I've been as appalled as the next person in terms of some of the things that are going on in terms of how our protective services sort of are taking away our freedoms as we protest. But on the other hand, a drone making sure that I'm safe during a protest is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying about the safety thing, and safety is, of course, very, very important. In my view, I think that if protesters are allowed to have drones, then law enforcement ought to be able to have drones. And if one of those two groups is not allowed, then the other should not be allowed. In other words,
right.
What the worst case scenario would be for law enforcement to be allowed to have drones, and then for protesters to be banned. That tends to be the default mode for law enforcement, generally speaking, whenever new technology comes along. For example, they didn't used to video record interrogations, but when that technology came along, law enforcement gave themselves the right to do that, but didn't give the right of suspects for themselves to record it in any way with audio or video. So now we have this disparity. So whenever a rare crooked cop wants to violate someone's rights, they just unplug the video camera, violate the rights, plug it back in. We've all seen, you know, the cop shows. That sort of thing tends to happen. And there have been cases where suspects have managed to surreptitiously record interrogations, and in some cases they've caught the police in perjury. So I'm all for either nobody can record stuff or everybody can record stuff. And in this case, you know, I don't think they're going to allow, you know, protesters to be flying drones around in crowded cities. So I guess the police won't be able to either. So we'll see. We'll see how that. See if anybody pushes back, if the police push back, and so on. And again, this is all about the federal government's use in any event. So very interesting. Well, we got some follow-ups for you. We told you previously how live streaming apps Meerkat beat Twitter and its Periscope app to the Android platform. And now Periscope has an Android app. The Android app has features the iOS version doesn't. In other words, it's better. Including more controls over notifications, which is really great, and a return to broadcast link that brings you back to the last stream you're watching. So if you want to try something else and it's terrible, you can just tap once and go right back to what you were watching before, which is very, very cool. Now, both of these major apps, Meerkat and Periscope, are on both iOS and Android, and so now it's on. So we'll see where all this goes. Joe, have you used either of these apps for any real purpose?
I played around with them a little bit, and I'm really curious, actually, Mike, because I'm going out to Hadoop Summit in early June out in San Jose, and I'm curious to see if any type of media is out there using the apps in any way, or if any of the vendors are, so to speak, sort of broadcasting from their booth. So I'm really curious in terms of live events and the potential implications there.
Yeah, it's, you know, I tried it for a while. I actually spent a lot of time on it for a while, but, you know, it's like, you never really get significantly large audiences, you know, a few dozen or maybe a few hundred. And, you know, occasionally I know that some people get very, very large audiences, but most users just get a smattering of people. And it's a lot of effort and a lot of time to reach a very tiny number of people. But of course, I'm on Twitch, so we're reaching thousands and thousands and thousands of people every time we broadcast. So that's an entirely different issue. So I don't know. It's fun stuff, and it's good for some purposes. But I think for, you know, a lot of people are investing a lot in it, hoping it will go somewhere and become a mass medium. But I think by its nature, it will never be a mass medium. It'll always be a one to.
It's a micro.
Not one to many, but one to a few.
Yeah.
I guess is what you'd call it. Well, we speculated previously on the show about what M stands for in the future M version of Android. I was rooting for M&Ms or, you know, something like that. But now, according to a report by Android Police, which they're very sure about, the M will stand for macadamia nut cookies, of all things. The version will also be called by its initials, MNC. Joe, this is terrible news. Macadamia nut cookies? I don't think I've ever even seen a macadamia nut cookie.
I can almost hear the protests already for those who are allergic to macadamia nuts, so we will see.
Yeah, right. That's the minority are going to be out there picketing Google I/O for sure. Well, we told you just throw macadamia nuts at them; they'll go away. We told you last week about a new Google Photo service that would be separate from Google+. Now the site Android Police, once again another scoop today, reveals what appears to be a new Google Photos app. The app does most of what you can now be done in the Photos section of the Google+ app. And it also enables new things such as a new gesture for pinching and swiping to open or close photos. And instead of Google Plus's Auto Awesome, which I absolutely love, which, by the way, turns uploaded pictures into animations, framed art photos, and collages without any involvement by the user. That's why I love it, because I don't have to do anything. The new Android app adds those features as options that have to be manually selected. So they're still there. They just don't happen automatically. And, of course, the way they do it in Google Plus is that they don't change your photos. They make another copy of your photos and change the copies so that your photos are always, you can always revert back to the original photo no matter what. So, but this sounds really great. And I think this is great news for everybody because I think personally Google has the very best photo tools there is, but a lot of people don't use them because they're deep inside Google Plus and now they're being liberated.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, Mike. Today we're talking about Google taking more and more components of Google Plus and sort of spinning them out, right? So we're going to wind up with all these individual pieces down the road. And I wonder 5 years from now if we'll be talking about some sort of next generation social media platform, whatever it's called by that point in time, that Google actually launches by rolling up all these pieces again. So we'll see how it plays out.
Exactly. Well, this photo thing is a perfect example. It used to be called Picasa, and then they folded it in. Now they're folding it back out. They're not going to call it Picasa this time, presumably. But yeah, I agree. I think that it's been a long enough to where it seems pretty clear that the combining of everything into Google Plus was kind of a freak occurrence. It was a rare moment in Google's history when they tried to do something like that, and I think it was all spearheaded by the person of Vic Gundotra, who really, really wanted to integrate everything into the mother of all services. And that was, Vic had a lot of political clout inside the company, and he tried to integrate everything. I think there was a battle between him and Sundar Pichai. Sundar Pichai won, Vic Gundotra left, and now they're taking everything out again. But I think that everything being separate is the natural order of things at Google and at other companies as well. Facebook likes to have lots and lots of apps for everything as well. It doesn't bother me a bit. I don't, Google Plus itself isn't harmed at all by, these spin-outs. The photo features are still available to everybody, and nobody on Google Plus that I know wants people to be coerced to use a social network they don't want to use just to use other things that aren't related to the stream, like photo tools and Hangouts and all the rest. So it's all good as far as I'm concerned. Well, in product update news, Microsoft announced plans to ship its Cortana virtual assistant product to Android by the end of June and to iOS sometime later this year. Unlike Cortana on Windows phones, Cortana on Android and iOS won't be able to access third-party apps or change phone settings. That makes a lot of sense because, of course, especially Apple is never going to grant that kind of thing to a rival of Siri. But this is great news. I think Cortana is a great virtual assistant, and now that it's going to be on Android and iOS, lots of people get to try it.
Yeah, I'm curious to see, Mike, where else they take this beyond the smartphone market, in terms of what other types of devices are we going to be speaking with through Microsoft's spoken search?
Yeah, definitely. Well, in mergers and acquisitions news, Twitter has been trying to buy Flipboard all year, according to a new report on Recode. If the acquisition does happen, it could cost Twitter more than a billion with a B, dollars, $1 billion. That's Kara Swisher, who couldn't be on the show today because she is busily preparing for the Code Conference, which begins today. Well, John Malone's Charter Communications intends to buy Time Warner Cable for $55.3 billion. Lots of media outlets are reporting that the deal is done, and those reports are false. It is not done. The company said the deal would improve broadband internet access for many customers. That's what they always say. Charter also intends to buy cable company Bright House Networks for $10.4 billion. That's a separate deal. The FCC said they'd review the deals to see if they're in the public interest. That's the part that will determine whether they will actually make these deals. And remember that Comcast's proposal to buy Time Warner for $45 billion, which is significantly less, was strangled in Washington. So I think that they are not, this is not a sure thing, and I don't think that publications should be reporting it as a done deal. Joe, do you think that they'll, in the end, approve this?
Mike, I think you are absolutely right. It is erroneous right now to say this is a done deal. I mean, factually, it just isn't, for number one. But also, if you read between the lines here, I mean, basically, the deal brokers here are saying, hey, you know what? We are going to make life better in terms of broadband. And the government has said, it's not enough to, quote unquote, do no harm. You actually have to provide substantial benefit in any type of M&A deal like this. So they're going to have to prove that there is benefit, number one. But number two, the thing that I'm hearing over and over again, that this deal is really about negotiating better content agreements with the content providers and strong-arming them for better pricing deals and gaining economies of scale. So, I don't know. I think it's a 50-50 call at this point as to whether or not this actually happens.
Yeah, I think you're right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, in insecurity news, the security firm FireEye has reported on a spam campaign that sends Word documents pretending to be job inquiries. The documents contain a malicious macro which downloads more malware targeting credit card and debit card data on point-of-sale terminals. The threat is called NitLove POS, and what's unusual about this is that point-of-sale malware isn't usually delivered through spam campaigns. So, you know, this is theoretically the same kind of malware that would enable a Target-style hack where you harvest credit cards from the actual point-of-sale devices, the cash registers, essentially, rather than back-end databases. And so this is pretty malicious. But I think that the entire industry, the retail world, is quickly moving away from hackable point-of-sale terminals. They're still out there. So of course this
fingers crossed. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's been a bad couple of years for the point of sale retail systems. And you know, it's been really interesting, Mike, to watch FireEye in recent months. Anytime there's a hack in any vertical market, whether it's healthcare, retail, financial services, FireEye, generally speaking, is called upon for their researchers to come in and figure out what happened. And sometimes FireEye's researchers are the ones who discovered the hack in the first place. It's almost like there's been a shift in the market where, you know, a decade ago, you and I would always hear from Symantec and McAfee and others when there was a hack. And now it seems to be FireEye in North America and Kaspersky Lab over in Russia, just spotting all these terrible things going on in the world of cybersecurity.
Well, we have a correction. I had said earlier in the show that I had never seen a macadamia nut cookie. Now I have. Thank you, John, who provided these. And yeah, you know what? The staff here at Twit is like, we don't let anything slip by. We're on top of it. Android right here. Amazing. I stand corrected. They're probably going to have these at Google I/O too, because when they were doing the ice cream sandwiches, they had freezers. You know, when Ice Cream Sandwich was the version of Android at Google I/O, they had freezers everywhere with ice cream sandwiches in it. That was a good year for that reason. Well, in the Human Resources Department, Apple designer Johnny Ive has been promoted from Senior Vice President of Design to a new role called Chief Design Officer. Ive will now oversee not only products, but also stores and corporate headquarters, including the giant spaceship campus now under construction. The change was announced in an article by comedian and actor Stephen Fry in the Telegraph newspaper, and we learned in that, or I learned in this article, Joe, that Johnny Ive is not only involved in the design, the ongoing design of the interior and the building itself, but he also designed the chairs and like lots of other stuff inside the building. This guy has way too much power and must be stopped.
Yeah, it must be stopped. But you know what's also been interesting in the coverage, Mike, is I've read a few articles that say, quote unquote, he's given up his sort of day-to-day responsibilities in terms of product design, and he's going to be sort of the big picture guy. That can be a blessing and a burden overall, especially for a company like Apple, where that initial design spec is so important.
Absolutely, but he's playing the role that Steve Jobs used to play, which is the sort of the person with enormous amounts of pull over design that has opinions about everything but isn't actually doing the day-to-day design, ordering his design minions to present all kinds of options, and he'll stand there and go, that one, or I don't like any of these, go back to the drawing board, which Steve Jobs used to do. And actually, that's one of the secrets of Apple's success under the reign of Steve Jobs, because he could turn them around in a second, and he had the weight by himself, by his own sort of edict, to change a design philosophy within the company. Most companies don't have that. It's usually a big negotiation. You have a lot of meetings. Everybody argues about it. At Apple, during the Steve Jobs years, Steve Jobs says, no, this is the color blue I want these plastic computers to have. And that was the end of the story. And they just, you know, there was no further conversation. They'd call the factory and it was a done deal. And I think Johnny Ive probably has close to that level of power, at least on design within Apple. So this is probably a reasonably good thing. I personally don't like some of Johnny Ive's design, so it's not necessarily a good thing for me personally. I think the Apple Watch physically is kind of ugly. Looks like it's from the 70s. I like it, but it's you know, the hardware design is not good. But that's Johnny Ive's style and always has been. He has this kind of 70s look to everything that he does. Very strange, but anyway, he's I don't know he's done being promoted. You know, he's a knight. You know what I mean? He's the chief design officer. He never wants to run the company because that's real work. So, you know, I think this is as high as a designer can go.
Potentially, Mike. The only other thing I worry about is, I think you're right. If you're going to put anyone in this role, Johnny's the guy for it, right? But on the flip side, let me just play devil's advocate, especially for the Star Wars geeks out there. If you looked at the prequels, the Star Wars prequels, this is what George Lucas did. People just walked into him with designs and ideas, and he said yes, no all day. And we wound up with two terrible prequels and a third one that was average at best. So, I'm hoping that the people who go into Johnny actually fight him and debate him on design rather than take a yes, no each time they visit him.
I know. I mean, if he's designing the chairs, he could literally be a pain in the ass for everybody in the company. And if nobody's telling him, no, this is a bad idea, then, his power will be unchecked. Well, our TNT fan, Monica Brooks, sent us an email about a recent Uber controversy. We didn't actually cover it on the show. It was less of a technology story and kind of more of a legal story, but we didn't cover it. She wants to bring it up, so we'll let her bring it up. She wrote that I saw this article about Uber and the ADA, that's the Americans with Disabilities Act, and whether or not it's a transportation company. I'm still catching up on this week's episode, so I'm not sure if you've already covered it. But I would love to hear you and your guest host's thoughts on Tuesday if you haven't discussed it. Love the show, Monica. Now, this is what this is about. Uber has been sued in 3 cases over the past 8 months in California, Texas, and Arizona over its alleged noncompliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, which requires transportation companies to provide access for people with disabilities. If people have a wheelchair, they have to be able to take that person as a customer, they need a place for the wheelchair, that sort of thing. Uber, however, claims it is not a transportation company. They say we make an app, we do information, we do technology, we don't provide transportation. And so therefore, the Americans with Disabilities Act does not apply to us. So,
what do you think? What do you think, Mike? Where do you come down on this?
Well, it's an interesting point of view, and you have to. I think where I come down is that if they can claim that, we have to see where this court cases go. The courts could actually set a precedent that says, no, you know what, you're a transportation company, or no, you're not a transportation company, and this doesn't apply. In which case, the lawmakers, both state and federal in Congress, have to make new laws to deal with a new reality. So, they're forcing the issue. I'm not super worried about it in the long term. I'm worried about it in the short term for people who need rides now, because people are being turned down for rides. And so, but I think in the long term, the courts and the lawmakers are going to have to sort this out and specifically rule on this very question, because, hey, if it's gonna end up being the case that that Uber drivers aren't going to help people with disabilities, maybe we'll all boycott them. Maybe it'll be a problem for them from a business point of view, and they'll do something about it. So I think this will be resolved one way or the other. But what do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I hate to say this, but I'm sort of on Uber's side here. I really do think that it's sort of this new technology solution that's all about empowering transportation people rather than being a transportation company itself. And I think what we're going to need to do, to your point, Mike, is sort of have some sort of legal review where it says, well, okay, well, maybe you're not a transportation company, which is my opinion, but you are disrupting and redefining the transportation industry and having so much influence over it, you're still subject to these laws. Yeah. So I don't know if there's like this gray area we can go down, but I'll see you in court on this one. Yeah,
I'll see you in court. But, I think that, ultimately it would be a bummer if something like, in general, when an alternative exists to an existing service that wins because they screw people who need help, and that's why they have lower costs and they can drive the other thing out of business, the world doesn't necessarily become a better place. So that's really what my concern in general, not just with Uber, but with things in general. You see a lot of digital versions of things that used to be done with lots of employees and done manually and so on, and they're not necessarily better. And sometimes they're better, sometimes they're not. Yeah, yes, let's let the market decide to a certain extent, but I'd hate to have them be advantaged by taking advantage of the disadvantage. I'll leave it at that. Well, our TNT fan of the day is Brad Pitcher in Eugene, Oregon, who posted this video on Twitter, and I think this is a rebuttal to another TNT fan who posted a video of an Apple Watch. But in the video, he's listening to and watching the show on an Android Wear watch while walking his dogs. Almost every time I'm about to hit. There we are in all its glory. It says a short video, 11 seconds. So what are you going to do? Show us how you watch or listen to TNT. Just record a video or take a picture of yourself or your setup and post it on Google+, Twitter, or Facebook. Use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT so we can find it. Joe Panettieri, what is happening at After Nines? Can you fill us in on the latest?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you check out afternines.com/CEO and you visit that URL tonight at 9:01 p.m. Eastern, we've got an exclusive podcast with the CEO of MemSQL. The CEO over there really describes how real-time big data and in-memory databases can transform the world of sort of what's going on in real time, how you can analyze that, and potentially monetize it with your own business. So great conversation, and that's with MemSQL CEO tonight at 9:01 p.m. Eastern, 6:01 p.m. Pacific.
Yeah, and he's been in the news a lot. That company's been in the news a lot this month. So it sounds like a hot company, and I can't wait to hear your interview. So thank you so much, Joe. We'll see you next week.
Mike, thanks for always having me. Take care, and I'll see you Tuesday.
Okay, bye-bye. You can subscribe to Tech News Today on Spotify, or you can choose another way to subscribe at twit.tv/TNT. You can also watch us live every weekday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1800 UTC at live.twit.tv. And if you're ever in the San Francisco Bay Area, come on in and watch us as part of our studio audience. Just make sure you send email to tickets@twit.tv before you come in. And if you'd like to help us grow our audience, here's how you can do it. Just post a link to twit.tv/TNT on the social media site of your choice, tag 3 friends, and recommend that they subscribe. You can also follow us on Twitter at Tech News Today TV. You can follow me on Twitter at Mike Elgan, and don't miss Tech News Tonight at 4 p.m. Pacific tonight and every weeknight. That is the Tech News Today, ladies and gentlemen. This show is produced by Jason Cleanthes and edited by Anthony Nielsen. My name is Mike Elgan. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.